in the Realms of Mediumship by Chico Francisco Candido Xavier and inspired by the spirit Andre Luis. Chapter 15, Corrupted Abilities. Night was falling. After the hot day, people were out on the street looking for cooler air. In keeping with our work plan, we were headed for another Spiritist center with owls when loud shouting grabbed our attention. 2 policemen were hauling an elderly man away from a cheap bar. He was deplorably drunk. The wretch was shouting and cursing in protest. "Just look at our poor brother," said Owless. And since it wouldn't be long before he was put in the police car, we paused to observe. Our poor friend was embraced by a spirit of the darkness, as if a strange octopus were absorbing him. We could see right away that intoxication had gripped both of them because they were completely juxtaposed, displaying the same disturbance. A few moments later, the car's horn blew hurriedly and our observations were cut short. That scene would have offered a valuable lesson. In response to Hilario's comment, the assistant decided that we had enough time to gather a few interesting facts, and so he invited us to enter the bar. It was crowded. A lot of gaiety, a lot of people. Inside that place there would certainly be plenty of material for a meaningful lesson. We entered. The environment's emanations produced an indefinable sense of discomfort. Huddled around the inveterate smokers and drinkers were sad, discarnate spirits in a state of longing. Some of them found happiness and nourishment by inhaling mouthfuls of the smoke blown into the air, still warm from the lungs that had exhaled it. Others were inhaling the breath of impenitent alcoholics. Nodding toward them, Owless informed us. Many of our brothers and sisters, upon leaving their physical bodies, attach themselves with such delirium to the sensations of the physical experience that they cling to incarnates who are temporarily imbalanced in the unpleasant habits they have surrendered to. But why immerse themselves in such a manner in pleasures of this sort? "Hilario," replied the assistant kindly, "what life has begun, death will continue." These individuals had set their minds on the lowest appetites of the world, feeding on emotions that placed them in the vicinity of animality. In spite of having attended places of worship regularly, they were unconcerned with the principles of their faith. They believed that life should be the worship of undignified satisfactions and the victory of the cunning and the strong. The call of death found them in the sphere of dark and criminal postures, and because it is the law that each soul receives from life in accordance with what it gives, they are interested only in places where they can nurture their particular illusions. In their current situation, they fear the truth and abhor it. They are like an owl that flees from light. My colleague made a gesture of pity and asked, "How will they ever change?" "The day will come when nature itself will empty their cup. There are 1,000 processes of readjustment in the infinite universe where the Lord's designs are fulfilled, whether called affliction, disenchantment, fatigue, tedium, suffering, imprisonment." Even so, I pondered, everything indicates that these unfortunate spirits won't tire of their insane pleasures any time soon. "I agree completely," replied our instructor, "but in the meantime, the law can lead them to the regenerative prison." "How so?" Hilario's question resonated crystal clear, and the assistant explained. "There are dolorous reincarnations that entail a tremendous expiatory struggle for souls mired in addiction. For instance, Down syndrome, hydrocephalus, paralysis, blindness, secondary epilepsy, severe mental impairment, birth defects, and many other anguishing but necessary afflictions that act on the behalf of the unbalanced mind from the moment of birth. Most of the time, such curative processes provide good results through the obligatory trials they offer. But what if our incarnate brothers and sisters, visibly immersed in dissipation, resolved to reconsider their pathway?" I asked. "What if they returned to regularity through a mental renewal based on the good?" "Ah, they would gain time, recovering themselves and aiding discarnates. Using the lever of the will, we can achieve true miracles. To do so, however, they would have to make a heroic effort." Observing the drunkards whose glasses were being shared with their invisible partners, Hilario remarked, "Yesterday, we visited a place where suffering discarnates expressed themselves through individuals in need of assistance, and there we studied something about mediumship. Here, we are seeing wicked spirits using persons with whom they are attuned in a perfect communion of inferior forces. Here, as well as at the center, is mediumship at work? Without a doubt, Alice confirmed. Psychic resources at this or that degree of development are peculiar to everyone, just like locomotion or breathing. They are abilities that the incarnate or discarnate spirits can use either for its benefit or harm. Being a medium doesn't mean that the soul is gifted with privileges or achievements. We often meet persons who are greatly blessed with the gift of mediumship, but who are controlled and subjugated by dark or morally delinquent spirits with whom they are perfectly attuned, dwelling in scandal and trouble instead of spreading the good. That is why mediumship is not enough for the realization of the work assigned to us. We need the doctrine of Spiritism, of pure Christianity, in order to control the mediumistic energy in a way that mobilizes it on behalf of spiritual sublimation in religious faith, just as we control electricity to provide civilization with comfort. Alice glanced at some nearby reserved rooms as if he were familiar with them. Fixing his gaze on a certain door, he invited us to go in. We followed close behind. At a table well provided with fine cognac, a young man was smoking heavily under the control of a spirit whose repulsive appearance was worthy of pity. The man was writing. Let's observe, recommended the assistant. The young man's brain was drenched in a dark, pasty substance that flowed from the hands of the pitiful brother entwining him. They were full partners in the authorship of the written material. The duo didn't notice us. In this case, Allah stated attentively, our unknown brother is a skilled psychographic medium. His brain cells are fully controlled by the wretched instigator of cruelty under our observation. He is linked to the spirit's imagination and assimilates its ideas, yielding to its dark purposes through the principles of magnetic induction. Because the man wants to write something dreadful, he has found someone who fortifies his mind and helps him accomplish it. In a meaningful tone of voice, he added, "We always find what we try to be." After a brief pause that forced us to reflect, Ilario asked, "But is he really a medium in the true meaning of the term? Could he take an active part in a common spiritist group?" "No, he is not under any spiritualizing discipline. He is a young man with a lively intelligence, with little life experience, and is controlled by perturbing spirits." After bending over the two for a few moments, the instructor stated benevolently, "Amid the excitement of the alcohol and the smoke they are enjoying together, they intend to cause a scandal involving a family going through tough times. A murder has been committed, and at its fringes appears the influence of a certain girl, along with the other multiple causes that triggered the deplorable occurrence. This young man, a friend of an industrious news editor, is himself inclined to malice. With his mental antenna connected to the most unpleasant aspects of the matter, as soon as he agreed to collaborate with his friend, he found the assistance of a tenacious and vicious persecutor of the girl in the spirit world. The spirit wants to exaggerate her participation in the murder in order to beat down her apprehensive mind and make her fall into the abuses of youth." "But how?" asked an alarmed Ilario. "Once in possession of the libelous article, the editor will be the vehicle of harmful information to the public. The girl, from one moment to the next, will be exposed to the most heartless accusation and will certainly become very troubled, since she did not play a role in the crime the way they intend to report it. The obsessor, calculatedly using the young man with whom he is attuned, means for the piece to cause a sensation. He wants to disparage her moral life and thus break her character, dragging her down, if possible, to the vicious swamp where he dwells." "Will he be successful?" insisted my colleague, astonished. "Who knows?" And somewhat sad, Alice added, "Naturally, the girl must have chosen the type of trials she is undergoing, willing to struggle valiantly against temptations. But what if she can't fight with the strength required? It would be better to say, if she doesn't want to, for the law does not entrust us with problems that exceed our ability to resolve. Thus, if she decides not to fight against the destructive influence, she will dwell for a long time in such afflictions, because, in principle, she is already tied to them." "And all because—" Ilario's question hung in the air as a troubled interrogation. but Alice eased our minds. Undoubtedly, the young woman and the wretch persecuting her had been linked to each other for a long, long time. They must have been together in the lower realms of the spirit world prior to the girl's present beneficial reincarnation. Encountering her again in the physical experience, whose advantages he does not yet share, her unfortunate companion is trying once more to imbalance her emotionally in order to exploit her in a vampirizing action. Alice paused briefly, smiled sorrowfully, and added, "However, to speak of the matter would mean opening the gripping pages of a large novel, and that would lead us away from our objective. Let's stick to mediumship." In an attempt to lead the conversation away from the numerous questions whirling in Ilario's head, I pondered. This scene should induce us to meditate on the general phenomena of interaction with the spirit world, which happens to all humankind without its perception. "Right," agreed the assistant. "Mediumistic faculties and collaboration from the spirit world are everywhere. Wherever there is thought, there are mental currents, and wherever there are mental currents, there is association, and every association entails interdependence and mutual influence. So we can see how necessary it is to live nobly, so that we can attract thoughts that ennoble us. Dignified work, goodness, fraternal understanding, serving our fellow beings, respect for nature, and prayer are all the best means of assimilating the higher principles of life. In the realm of ideas, we give and receive in spirit according to universal laws that we cannot deceive." With a silent gesture reminding us of our duties, the assistant invited us to leave. We went back out onto the street. We had barely taken a step when an ambulance went by slowly with its siren blaring to clear the way. In the seat beside the driver sat a man with gray hair framing his pleasant but worried face. Next to him, however, embracing him tenderly and naturally, a spirit in a lily-white garment enveloped his head in soft, calming radiations of silvery light. "Oh," asked Ilario, curious, "who's that man in such fine company?" Alice smiled and explained, "Not everything on the common path is corrupted energy. That is probably a physician on some life-saving endeavor." "But is he a spiritist?" "With all the respect we owe Spiritism, it is imperative to remember that the Lord's blessing can descend on any religious expression. Above all, the man is most likely a humanitarian and benevolent professional, who, because of his habit of aiding his neighbor, now merits the assistance he is receiving. It would not be enough to be a spiritist or a doctor to retain the beneficent influence that accompanies him. To accommodate himself so harmoniously with such a spirit, he must have a clear conscience and a heart that radiates peace and fraternity." "But can we classify him as a medium?" asked my companion, somewhat disappointed. "And why not? He's a medium of blessed human values, especially in assisting the sick, where he channels the mental currents of spirits of the good, devoted to loving the sufferers of the world." With an expressive inflection in his voice, he added, "As we can see, the influences of good or evil in this evolutionary sphere extend everywhere, and everywhere we can register the presence of mediumistic faculties that assimilate such influences according to the happy or unhappy, correct or unworthy way in which each mind places itself. Thus, by studying mediumship in spiritist sanctuaries faithful to Jesus, we observe a power peculiar to all individuals, of general benefit if under a guidance capable of disciplining and leading it to the utmost service in the good. Take electricity, for example, which little by little is transforming the face of the world. It is not enough to have a powerful waterfall with the potential of millions of horsepower. A power plant has to be built next to it to control its resources, intelligently setting them in motion and distributing them according to everyone's needs. Otherwise, the waterfall will continue to be a living picture of phenomenal beauty, but an irretrievable waste. Time did not allow us to continue our conversation, so we headed for a group where our studies of the previous evening would resume.